Shadows behind the glass. On the outskirts of a small coastal town, lost in endless fog, stood an old lighthouse. Its light had long gone out, and the structure itself was abandoned, like most of the houses in the area. The locals whispered that the lighthouse was cursed, but no one could say why. Only an old fisherman sitting in the tavern once muttered, "There's something there. Something that watches from the darkness." His words were followed by a long silence, after which he added, "And it's watching us." A young scientist, Edmund Hartley, came to the town to investigate the anomalous phenomena associated with the lighthouse. He was a skeptic, a man of science, and didn't believe in tales of curses. But from the very first evening, he felt that something was wrong. The air around the lighthouse was thick, as if saturated with an invisible weight, and the silence surrounding it seemed unnatural. Even the waves crashing against the rocks below sounded muffled, as if something greater was drowning them out. The lighthouse stood on the edge of a cliff, and its windows, covered in layers of dust and salt, reflected the dim light of the moon. Edmund set up his equipment in the main hall. Motion sensors, cameras, microphones. Everything was ready for observation. But within an hour, he noticed something strange. Shadows appeared on the camera footage. They moved behind the glass, even though there was no one outside. The shadows were blurry, indistinct, but their outlines resembled something unnatural. Long, twisting limbs, too many eyes, shapes that defied the laws of physics. Edmund tried to convince himself that it was just a trick of light and shadow, but with each passing hour, the shadows became more distinct. They seemed to be getting closer, as if studying him. On the second day, Edmund decided to inspect the top of the lighthouse. The staircase leading upward creaked under his weight, and every step echoed in the emptiness of the tower. When he reached the top, his gaze fell on an old mirror hanging on the wall. Its surface was cracked, but in the reflection he saw not himself, but something else. The shadows he had observed on the cameras were now in the mirror. They moved, as if trying to break free. Edmund quickly turned away, but the feeling of being watched never left him. That evening, he heard sounds. A faint whisper coming from nowhere. The words were in an unknown language, but their rhythm evoked a strange sense of unease. The whisper grew louder when Edmund approached the windows. He tried to record it with his microphone, but when he played it back, all he heard was silence, interrupted by strange clicks, like the sound of glass cracking. On the third day, Edmund noticed that the shadows had begun to seep inside. They appeared in the corners of the room, slowly crawling along the walls, as if trying to surround him. His instruments registered anomalous readings. The temperature dropped to sub-zero levels. The air became thick like jelly, and the sounds grew louder. He tried to convince himself that there was a rational explanation, but his rationality was beginning to crack. On the final night, Edmund decided to stay in the lighthouse, despite his fear. He wanted to understand what these beings were. But when the shadows finally surrounded him, he realized he was wrong. These were not beings. This was something greater. Something that existed beyond our understanding, beyond time and space. The shadows began to merge into a single mass, forming a figure that defied description. Its shape constantly shifted, as if trying to adapt to his perception. But even that was unbearable for his mind. The last entry in his journal read, They don't want to harm me. They want to show me something. But I can't understand it. My mind can't withstand it. They are behind the glass. They've always been behind the glass. And now, the glass has cracked. The next day, Edmund was found in the lighthouse. He was sitting in a corner, clutching his head. His eyes were wide open, and his face was frozen in an expression of madness. All the equipment was shattered, and the walls were covered in strange symbols that no one could decipher. The symbols seemed ancient, yet alien, as if they had been created by something that did not belong to this world. The lighthouse was sealed, and the town was completely abandoned. But sometimes, on moonlit nights, local fishermen see a faint light in the lighthouse windows, and shadows moving behind the glass. Some say the light flickers in a rhythm resembling Morse code. But no one dares to get closer to check.